Hey everyone, I'm Hailey Stagner, and I'm part of the Scholar class of 2025, and I'll be talking about my senior year DSP research. And today I'm with
Michaela.
And Sophia.
So, Hailey, tell us about what your research topic is for the past 2 years.
For this year, I've been researching the decision making process and the values that go into people deciding whether or not to leave their current church and what church to join in the future.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting topic. What made you decide that you wanted to research this in particular?
Well, last year I started researching denominations and, in particular, denominational divides in American Protestant churches. And when I looked at denominational divides, I saw that a lot of the causes of them were just people, broken people in leadership roles in the church, and broken people following broken people. And so that got me really interested in where we are today. The church is still made up of broken people, and there's still broken leadership and a lot of church hurt, and people leave the church at alarming rates today. So I wanted to see from Christians, like, what are they looking for in their churches and what kind of makes them keep coming back time and time again. So on that note, I wanted to ask y'all, what do you like best about your churches?
I think for me, one of the things that I like best about my church is the worship. It was definitely one of the first things I noticed when we first visited a few years ago was like the worship because that's how they opened their service. And now I'm at the age where like I can do worship for my youth group, but also like do worship for what I call like big church, like the actual big service. So I just really like how engaging it is, how involved it is, and how they really try to have a good balance of songs for like the younger generation, but also the older generation that goes to our church. And another thing I really do like is how we're really missions focused. We give a lot of our tithes to a lot of missions locally, but also globally. And I've been able to go on a mission trip with my church. So I think those are two big things that I really like.
Yeah, so some of my participants actually said a lot of the same things. They touched on the idea that missions were an integral part of church and that they wanted to know that their money, like you mentioned, was going to the people around them and was actually going to serve the communities they're in. And also, they wanted an area to be able to get involved in, kind of like how you're involved in worship. Um, Additionally, though, a lot of my participants mentioned worship and like, oh, um, I don't have to like the worship to like to go to church. So I think it's interesting that you're saying like worship is a really important part to me. Versus a lot of my participants, obviously of different demographics and ages, were saying worship's not that important. There's a lot of things that are more important to me.
Hmm.
But so, on that note, what are some things y'all prioritize in a church, and what makes you want to come back and be plugged in, get involved in your church, and attend every single Sunday?
Yeah, so we're going to college soon, so we're looking at different churches. And, one of the things that I've been doing during my visits is church hunting. So, personally, one of the things that I prioritize is fellowship, first of all. I think that we're told that our walk as Christians is not going to be easy and that we're going to encounter trials and hardship. And I think that really there's no better way of doing it than with people that share your same values. And I think especially when we're looking at friendships in general, I feel like it's really important to have people who have the same principles that you do. And I think you can find a lot of those people at church. So one of those things is fellowship. And then the second thing that's very important to me is theology. So my family is Presbyterian, so we go to a PCA church. And one of the things that my parents have warned me about when going to college and looking at other churches is you have to be careful that you're not going to a church that advertises itself as Christian, but really has theology that goes against the fundamental truths in the Bible. So just basic theology and having preachers and even just a worship team that has values that align with what Scripture says, that's something that's very important to me.
Everything you just touched on was basically what my respondents were saying. What was really important to them was community and the idea that they're not going to come back to a church if they can't be involved because, like you said, we're not made to be on this earth alone and we're not made to go at it alone. So that's really impressive, I guess, that you're saying the exact same things. And then another thing that you touched on was doctrine. And again, my respondents, they came from different backgrounds and had different priorities within doctrine. Like they weren't all non-denominational or Presbyterian or Baptist. They came from a variety of different denominations, but what was important to all of them was doctrine. And within doctrine, they did mention that they didn't want the prosperity gospel, and I think you were kind of touching on that. Like you wanted biblical-based teaching, not just feel-good teaching. And then finally, you kind of touched on it. You didn't really say it specifically, but spiritual growth and the walk with others and people pushing you closer to Christ. And a lot of my respondents said the same thing. They wanted a community, of course, but they wanted a community that would push them closer to Christ instead of away from him. So although that's what y'all are looking for in a church, do you think your friends have similar values to you? And do you think when you go off to college, you'll be able to find a church that matches these things you're looking for?
I think, like, because we go to a Christian school, it's really easy to assume like all the people around you are Christian, when in fact that's not true. Like I would say, even here, I have like a lot of friends who I know are Christian. They live out Christian values. While I also have friends on the other side of the spectrum that maybe are like either unsure about faith or are like kind of hostile towards it in a way. So I think it really depends on like what set of friends it is, like whether it's like church friends, school friends, if they have similar values to you. But I think what Sophia was saying about finding that community, I think that's something I share with a lot of people that I'm close to. And I definitely think that's like an encouragement to me as I'm like going to college, and I know a lot of people from HC are also going to where I'm going to go. Just knowing that I have a lot of similar values to some of them is kind of an encouragement to me to know like I'll find a place, and if I don't, I can ask them like where they're going and visit their church, you know.
I would say yes, but to a degree. So, yeah, we go to a Christian school. So the majority of people here would say that they're Christians. Most of us would agree that we believe that God exists. We believe that Jesus Christ was born, died, and was raised again. So we believe in the fundamental truths, I would say, in the Bible. But I think if you ask specific people, you would find that the way that we interpret maybe more nuanced parts of the Bible might be different. Like our school is not the most politically diverse school in the world, but I think you'll find that if you ask people questions about, maybe more controversial issues like abortion or LGBT rights and all that kind of stuff, I think you would find that we have slightly different answers. So I would say that we have, especially my friends, I would say we have a lot of fundamental values that we share, but maybe the details of that are a little different.
Actually, I want to touch on one thing that you just mentioned, Sophia, like political issues. Some of my respondents were like, I'm going to a church and I enjoy the church, but yet the pastor is saying some politically charged things that I don't agree with, and so I'm going to switch churches because politics have no place in the church. So I think it's interesting that we're mentioning politics. Like, yeah, I know we agree fundamentally on the same Christian values, but we don't agree on the political spectrum and what that actually means for us. And how to interpret those values in our everyday life. So that's actually really interesting. And again, everything y'all said kind of matches what I've been saying with my respondents' answers, and just community is very important. I will say that you said you think a lot of the people have similar values to you, but you don't really know. It is interesting hearing the respondents say, oh, my husband or my wife value something more than I do, but they still decide to go to a similar church or go to the same church because they value family and community more so than they value the other things like doctrine or worship styles. So you could have the same values, but a different order of importance of those values. And that was interesting to see.
Yeah. So a question for you. You shared a lot of what your respondents believe and kind of how that compares to us, but I guess what's the most interesting thing that you've learned while doing your research, whether it's from their answers or from your own individual research?
I will say it's interesting to me, again, seeing the broken people and how a lot of them were like, hey, I know there's broken people in my community, and yet I'm going to keep coming back time and time again because I value that community and I want to be a part of it. I also think that my respondents were really against the idea of church shopping and wanted to get roots and really plug into wherever they are, regardless of if they agree with everything that's going on in their church. And I think that's really interesting because I know some of my friends have changed churches already. We're 18 years old. They've changed churches multiple times and are like, I just want to find the right place for me. Versus most of my respondents are older, like 40s, 50s, 60s, and they're saying, yeah, I want to find a church that matches my values, but it doesn't have to be perfect because we're never going to find a perfect community of Christ. We have to make that community better. So I thought that was really interesting and really cool.
Yeah, there's like with your research, there's just so many directions where you could go with this. So where do you think that this research is going to take you in the future?
I think if I were to have to do it again, obviously I'd want a larger population size and more diversity of ideas. While my participants weren't of the same denomination, they were all in the Houston area. So geographically minded, there's different cultural ideas from place to place. And of course, also being from Houston, they're all in the United States. So internationally, there's different ideas that kind of tie people to churches. And I would like to be able to explore those. And also in the future, I think that churches could be able to use these ideas and try and continue to get people coming back to church, prioritize the things that people are actually looking for in their churches to encourage them to come back and be plugged in and attend again every Sunday instead of being Easter and Christmas people. Like really try and make sure a community in your church is a place where other people want to be and that you're teaching scripturally sound doctrine. And I think if churches realize that and remember that, our church attendance could be greater in the future. Yeah.
That's great.
That's really awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Hailey.
Thank y'all for doing this talk with me, and I appreciate it.
Of course.